Hello and welcome to Telecom TV. My name's Martin Warwick. We're here at Mobile World Congress 2016 in Barcelona in Spain. And I'm talking this time with Nigel Upton, who is Hewlett-Packard Enterprises General Manager, CMS, MVNE, IoT. That's quite a sort of alphabet soup there, Nigel, but
Thank you.
we'll get to exactly what all that means in a minute. And thanks for being here, for talking to us.
Pleasure.
And on your right, Pete Murray, who is also Hewlett-Packard Enterprise and is VP of IoT Sales Worldwide OEM. Pete, welcome. Let's start with you. And quite a straightforward one, really. We hear an immense amount of the encroaching importance of the Internet of Things, IoT. What's the present state of play?
Well, it's a great question, and we think it's a huge opportunity. And here at Mobile World Congress, pretty much everybody is talking about it. We see it as the third wave of disruption. The first wave being the optimization of the data centers, the second being the Internet of the Cloud, and the third where we're bringing together the OT world, the operational technology world, and the IT world. And we think it's about being able to connect devices together so that you can actually make incredible things happen. What we do know is it's going to be a big opportunity. We know that there's going to be a lot of devices. Gartner reckon there's going to be over 26 billion devices by 2020. And IDC estimate that by 2020, about 10% of the world's data is going to be coming from the IoT world. So what we know is huge opportunity, lots of data, but for our perspective, the most important thing is it really has to drive business value, and that's where we believe the focus should be.
Thank you. Let's look then at where the potential pitfalls are before we look at it go any further. The sort of amount of data, even if it's only small amounts of data infrequently coming from measuring devices, whatever it may be, the amount of data that's crossing the networks already, telco networks, operator networks, is massively high because of demand for mobile and for video and so on. When it comes to the Internet of Things, that's going to put even more strain on an already strained infrastructure and network. So, coming from that point of view, what are telcos doing about that today, Nigel? Where are they in the Internet of Things?
Okay. So telcos are embracing this wholeheartedly and creating complete business units around IoT. However, the business model for IoT is substantially different to a subscriber. A thing you might be able to charge $1 a month, or 50 cents a month, or 5 cents a month, versus my bill, which is $100 a month. And so that infrastructure has to be at a very different price point. So what we do is we work with operators in building overlay networks for them that are designed at a price point to deal with IoT traffic. So we can put an IoT platform in there and charge $1 per device a year, down to 10 cents a device a year. We can put in overlay networks that are an order of magnitude less in terms of cost, but still can handle the scale, but don't have the complicated OSS and BSS systems that traditional operators have. So it's not running Amdocs billing,
Right.
for example.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Maybe I could add a little bit to
Please
that,
do.
if possible.
Anytime you like. Yeah.
I think the other thing that we're trying to do is really help our customers and the telecoms providers in particular work out where to actually analyze the data, because the key thing is if you don't need to transfer the data across the network, then you're going to save time, you're also going to save cost. So we're looking at providing ways to look at analytics at the edge, or computing at the edge of the network, so that you don't have those two issues. So traditional compute at the data center or in the cloud, we will continue to support and drive critical things, but we're also enabling that compute capability at the edge, which also has to be robust because it could be in a difficult environment, a factory, or where it's not ideal conditions. But I think those are two quite important things which we're trying to help our customers to tackle.
And Pete, you're absolutely right. It's very driven by the use case. And where you have a lot of computational requirements for connected car, where there's so much information coming off the head units, coming off the actual vehicle itself, that's when you move the processing as close as you can to where the actual data is. In other cases like smart cities and smart meters, there's tiny bits of data, and it's insignificant amounts of data which are coming across different types of networks, like a LoRa network or a Sigfox network, and that's where you can afford to do the computational further out. So you just got to look at the use case and work out lots of data, very low latency, move it to the edge. Where you do have very small packets of data infrequently coming across, you can move that, you can afford to have that done more and more in the actual data center.
Okay.
So the use cases are fascinating on this.
Absolutely agree. Yeah.
Let's move on. All the questions henceforth are to both of you, so I don't mind who answers first, say the least of it. Let's have a look at what HPE is doing today to help telecommunications companies provide IoT solutions. Where are you on that curve?
Where we help telecommunication companies is in two areas. One is we build infrastructure for them that's designed from the ground up to handle things rather than subscribers, and we call those overlay networks.
Yes.
The second is on a go-to-market with these guys, where we will partner with them to be able to provide connectivity for devices. Let's say it's a GE or an ABB or a Schneider, and they have these devices that have a lot of sensors on them, and they're putting it through a SIM card. We'll work with them to be able to do the analytics with them, to do the systems integration, to do the application development on top. So we'll bring in all of the other pieces of HP that allow us to be able to make that complete solution work, including enterprise services, including the networking capability that we have both from the Wi-Fi side, from Aruba, as well as from the edge computational pieces, which is the edge client server. So we try and bring all of it together and behave both as an infrastructure provider but also as a go-to-market partner.
Thank you. Pete, have you got anything to add to
Yeah,
that?
it was a good summary, and I would completely agree. The good news is that we've got some great relationships with our telecom customers. They're very deep, and we continue to work with them in multiple fields. We see the Internet of Things as an extension of our work together. And we see 6 principal pillars where we can continue to focus. I think Nigel touched on a number of them. But we see connectivity as critical with our wireless capability through Aruba, connecting the things wherever the things happen to be. Big data, making sure that we can look at analyzing that data and figuring out what it's telling us and what actions we can take as a result of it. Deep-based computing, either at the edge or in the data center. Continuing to help them with security, which is a key theme running through almost everything that we do now. And also making sure that we can give the services to glue the complete solution together. And lastly, that we think that the success in the Internet of Things is really about open standards, and it's also about driving great partnerships. And what we try to do working with our telecom partners is create that ecosystem of partners that actually can provide the intellectual property to make that particular use case work. So if you get those 6 things right, we believe you can drive ultimately a really good IoT solution.
We've heard the theory and the way you want to work it. How about the nitty-gritty? Can you provide us with a few examples of customers that are actually using these solutions and how you're working with them?
So we've been doing this for a while. In fact, it used to be called M2M back in the day.
I remember that.
So what we're demonstrating downstairs is the progress we made on connected car. We're also demonstrating smart cities, where we partner, as Pete said, we have very deep relationships with the operators. So in that case, we partnered with Vodafone, and we built out a smart city sensor of Internet of Things devices and measurements in a model city in Italy, just by Modena. And that we're demonstrating downstairs to show how the statistics gathered off that drives efficiencies from collecting garbage through to how energy is used. We have millions of devices already connected to our networks where we're managing these things, and it's in all regions. It's in Japan, it's in Europe, and now it's in the Americas as well. Anything you wanted to add to the...
Sure, probably a really good example. We've recently gone through the Super Bowl experience with our colleagues in the US, and the Levi Stadium is a great example where we've actually implemented an Aruba beacon system. What does that mean, I hear you ask? Well, the answer is that the 70,000 crowd that will be attending, and I suspect possibly more in the Super Bowl, actually have a location-based service, an ability to be able to even buy a hot dog and have it delivered to their seat. So using smartphone technology, they can be located anywhere in the stadium, and they can interface to not only the procurement and the vendor infrastructure, but they also can get instant replays of the key moments in the sporting event. So we've seen that as a way forward. Obviously, location-based service is a critical thing. I guess the other one that we would talk about is working with companies around predictive maintenance. So we've worked with organizations that have the maintenance challenge associated with big wind farms, particularly offshore. And the maintenance is very, very costly exercise. And if you can actually gather data and you can look at it in a smart way and predict when you actually need to carry out maintenance, as opposed to when the checklist says you should do so, you can drive significant efficiencies and obviously cost savings. And in some of those environments, that really can add up to several millions of dollars. So two good prime examples, and we have many others. And what we're trying to do is work with as many of our customers as possible in our proof of concept centers to really make sure that we can actually drive out successful IoT solutions.
Okay, thank you. Now, let's look not on the downside, but let's on the obverse of the coin, as it were. What are the problems, the most frequent problems that your customers tell you they're facing when they're implementing IoT?
I'll kick off if I may, and then Nigel, please add. I think the biggest one that comes up during my conversations with customers is they know there's an opportunity, they can see efficiencies, but what they're struggling with is actually trying to figure out what that business case ultimately looks like and actually how they can drive it through their organizations. I think that's number one. I think the second challenge that they often face is that these solutions are not necessarily coming up through the IT departments. They're typically coming from the line of business. They're coming from, in some cases, production, some cases marketing, depending on the use case. And if it's not implemented in the right way, what you can do is you can end up with things like shadow IT projects occurring, and that can cause a little bit of disruption in organizations. So those are the two that come up quite frequently. I don't know, Nigel, if you want to add to those.
Yeah, I mean, IoT is easy to get started. And as you said, you can start it outside of IT quite easily. What we found was that we were working with a large auto manufacturer. They've obviously been doing connected car for quite a few years. They had over 18 IoT platforms that had all been built by different departments. And their advice to us was, if anybody comes up and tells us they have another killer app for IoT, we're going to shoot them. And HP, what we want you to do is we want you to build us a killer platform. So we want a consistent platform that allows us to be able to plug in all these different things, and that way, if you have a consistent platform, and by the way, you better adhere to the standards like 1M2M, and if you have that consistent platform, then I can enrich that data from lots of different sources and make it much more powerful rather than the horizontal stovepipes that get built out. So that was one of the key pieces. The other is that while everybody talks about IoT, the generation of revenue from IoT is still not where it needs to be, and that's where it needs more effort from companies like Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, partnering with both our infrastructure companies, our telco providers, our industry vertical experts to be able to realize that value, and the analytics is still the key. And it's that turning those analytics into dollars that is the hard piece.
How close is it getting to that sort of business model where there will be a return on investment and turning it into dollars?
I think we're very close. I think it's maturing. I think the areas we're likely to see significant returns initially are going to be around manufacturing, looking at factory efficiencies, and I think also taking another look at supply chains and really making sure that we can drive those connected worlds in a better, more optimized way. I think what we're seeing is that although there is an element of factory automation, generally the factories don't tend to talk to each other, and therefore the best practices and some of the overall efficiencies are not there today. There is a strong willingness of companies to want to drive this forward, and they're really looking for help and partnerships to be able to get them there. But I think we're very, very close. I think the technology is at the point where we can actually deliver these. And I also think the cost curves are definitely supporting the returns of these business cases. It's not always easy, but it certainly can be done.
Okay. Final question to you then, gentlemen. Are there differences among geographies when you're implementing IoT solutions and addressing its challenges and issues? I assume that if you're in a desert it's different to being in the equatorial rainforest, for sure, but geographically, as far as the markets are concerned, do you perceive, are there big differences?
The differences we've seen are places where there's much more discipline in the business execution, like Japan. They've been doing this probably longer than most people. Where there is more creativity and a little less rules, somewhere like India, it takes a lot longer to get the benefit, because this really becomes powerful when you scale it out, and it's scaled out consistently. Then you start to get very powerful analytics back from all of these things. So a lot of it is to do with the longer term thinking and the business discipline that forces the processes to be followed to be able to gather data and add more structure to it. We have projects all over the world, but our biggest and probably longest projects have been in places like Japan. Europe is fairly well advanced, particularly around smart energy, smart cities, as is the Middle East. Latin America, in our view, is still emerging, but there are some common industries that hit everywhere, like connected car.
Sure.
And that's consistent no matter where you go, and that accelerates the industry wherever that happens.
So there's something to do with logistics, vehicles, transportation, that kind of thing. You can see it applies more or less equally across the globe.
And the heavy industry, the where you've got the GEs or the ABBs building things, they will insist on a consistent methodology of how they gather that data and how they do their maintenance, all the rest worldwide.
But do you see a difference? Is it because of cultural perceptions and organisational psychology in the way these things work? There's a big difference between a Japanese company and your average Indian company, for example.
Yeah, I would add to what Nigel's just said. I think that what we're seeing is that certain cultures, particularly the Japanese and the Korean markets, are very, very fast technology adopters, and they're willing to actually not only take this technology but also look at longer term business case usage. There is also a high degree of skill and education that meets that technology adoption. So they're doing some really, really quite creative things out there. If you come back to Europe, there's a very, very strong focus on manufacturing, particularly in Germany, that's driving the digitization of the efforts that they're looking at there. So culture definitely plays a key part, education, and the adoption curve basically cuts in.
Okay, we're just about out of time. It's obviously a fascinating area and getting more and more involved in it. I think everybody is. And it's really interesting stuff. Now, thanks very much for that. Pete Murray, Nigel Upson, thank you both very much indeed.
It's
Thank
a
you,
pleasure.
Martin.